Thanks, Scott, for joining me today. We're going to do a quick case study conversation around some of our recent digital transformation business in specifically the packaging industry. However, as we mentioned, this conversation can really be scaled to any industry when it takes specific best practices of going through overall digital transformation or technology implementation projects. So thanks so much for joining me, Scott. Can you give us just a little introduction of you and then an overview of the project you and your team worked on?
Sure. Yeah, it's Scott Janke. I've been with Third Stage for a couple of years now, currently in a director of digital transformation role. Been in consulting most of my career, going on 30 plus years, but also spent a number of positions in operations, both at a VP level and a C level as well. And just kind of spent my the last couple decades just mirroring up the fact that technology alone is meaningless unless it actually does some transformation of the operation. So glad to be here. Let's see, the case study that I'm bringing to the table today, we were brought in to do an assessment of an active project within the packaging industry. This organization is quite large, 20 plus billion in revenue, and I think over probably starting before COVID, but throughout COVID, acquired and has grown quite a bit in their operational, and realized after the fact that their technology didn't meet or didn't fit well with the current business model. So this particular client went through the evaluation, decided to move forward with an ERP platform, and brought us in to kind of do that double check. For those who have spent time on YouTube and LinkedIn and other video sources, we spend a lot of time as Third Stage in providing guidance towards organizations to navigate through the landmines within an implementation. So that was exactly what this group hired us. Very large project going on probably about 5 years and well over north of $250 million. So they were right to be hesitant and be looking out for the threats that might be lurking behind closed doors to make sure that this large transformation project goes well.
Absolutely, that insurance policy, right, as we kind of talk about it for your transformation. So when you are engaged with a company specifically of that size, because it sounds like a pretty complex and obviously very expensive project, where do you start in those types of health assessments for technology implementations, or just to make sure that the implementation is on track to achieve maximum business results?
Yeah, something we do in all of our projects, both in a strategy type engagement, but also prior to embarking upon an ERP selection, is we really do an assessment of the leadership and find out exactly where they're going, where they're steering the ship. Technology, like I mentioned, means very little unless it truly transforms, but just increases the efficiency and effectiveness of the organization. So we usually start, even in an assessment on a project that has already started, we go back to the beginning. You know, what was the driving factors in going forward with a large ERP implementation? What are the strategies? What's the goals and objectives of the organization 5, 10, 15 years from now? And what were those general pain points and thresholds and concerns they had with their current infrastructure, why they went down this path? We tend to really push hard on our clients as well as our prospects of before they embark upon a big transformation project, they really have to be committed to do that. I think everyone should not be surprised that ERP implementations are difficult, challenging, long, expensive. And not only do you want to go through the implementation successful, but why were you doing the implementation in the first place, right? What were the goals and objectives of the organization? So even coming in midstream in a project, we still go back to the beginning. Because at the end of the day, when things are difficult at go live or maybe the year after go live, the executives are going to start scratching their heads because they probably have forgotten why they started on this journey in the first place. So having that refreshed in their minds lets them go through this process and get through those difficult times because it is trying to achieve something successful for the project or for the company.
Yeah, Absolutely. And you mentioned mergers and acquisitions, which is something we see a lot here at Third Stage. What are some unique challenges to a company that is large, that is acquiring other companies from a technical and operational perspective?
We spend a lot of time at Third Stage on the communication and change management aspects of projects and transformations. And really, the answer to that question, and hopefully a direct path, is listening to your people, of understanding what those challenges and obstacles are. Even if you are a single company and you go out over 5 years and buy another company every year, and they have an infrastructure and an ecosystem of working technology, at the end of the day, they still represent five distinct companies and does not represent a holistic view of that umbrella of organizations. So even through successful mergers and acquisitions, you still have to assimilate those organizations. We don't ever expect that a single platform from one vendor will satisfy all the needs of a large organization like the one I mentioned at the beginning of this call. But it's being very diligent and strategic of when you decide to go after an application that we would either call a fringe application or a point solution, that the point solution is a better fit for the organization than the ERP platform. But most of the time when we go through these ERP selections, it's because they've had all these small little point solutions that have just accumulated over the years. But if you tag on that with mergers and acquisitions, it doubles that, it triples that. And at the end of the day, is the C-suite or even the lieutenants underneath them, are they getting the right data, refreshed and current, to make decisions? When you go through mergers and acquisitions, they tend to operate still independently, and we're just transferring chunks of data from one company to the other. And that's not a very effective or efficient way of running your organization. But you have to take the time and understand what are those pain points and obstacles that your team is facing, and bubble that up to a holistic strategic transformation project.
Yeah, definitely a tall order
Yeah,
as well, a big
absolutely.
project. Yeah. And choosing a new software for the entire organization obviously will not only affect those kind of siloed M&A cultures that you had mentioned, but also the organization as a whole, obviously. So when you are a very, large, complex organization, I can assume it can be kind of challenging to buy off-the-shelf software. Is there a higher level of customizations, and how do you ensure that those customizations, you don't fall down the black hole of customizing everything, as opposed to leaning on the structure of the core ERP system?
Well, believe it or not, I actually think that a lot of these homegrown systems start off with smaller companies, because they can't afford to go out and buy a modern solution. So they usually have a couple of IT hackers inside the organization. They go off and acquire, if they don't already have something like a SQL Server back end, and they start developing their own stuff. And that's absolutely the best fit to an organization, but the absolute worst way to grow the organization. And many times, in fact, I had a couple of calls today of a smaller firms than the one I mentioned, and not only do they have some off-the-shelf software, but they have a number of homegrown databases and dashboards and all that stuff. Well, guess what? When that one IT person leaves, right, all that information goes away. And in many times, if they are a company that has a number of on-premise applications, and they do some customizations because it is on-premise, and they have the skill set, good or bad, to actually develop some customized applications, we get called in to say that some of these updates on the software and security patches haven't been done in decades. And so just all kinds of risk assessments start flaring off that, yes, if you want to have the absolute best fit, maybe customize is what you're thinking. But from a long-term sustainability, that is something we rarely suggest or recommend. Like I mentioned before, if there is something on an ERP platform that doesn't fit them exactly the way they want it to meet, and rather than going down the customized path, is to look for a point solution in that one area. Case in point, almost all of the ERP vendors, if not all of them, have some form of a CRM, some way that they can track leads that turns into customers. But some of them are very basic, and none of them go to the level of a truly built solution like, let's say, Salesforce. So if they're only doing some email campaigns and they're just tracking contacts, the ERP solution is just fine. But if they already have a tool like Salesforce and they like it, most of the contacts that we have with the ERP vendors will recommend staying with that and integrating together. So there's still a need to have point solutions. It's just a matter of, again, going back to what is the goal and objective of the organization and what do they need to be competitive in the marketplace. Back office applications do not need to be customized, in my opinion, right? They're do it like out of the box, but if it's something unique about your product line, reaching customers, reaching markets, and you need something more tailored, still a customized solution is probably not the path, but maybe a point solution is in that area.
So something I want to unpack there, Scott, is those bolt-on applications can be industry specific, right? So that a lot of times we're talking about in packaging today, but whether you're in automotive or heavy manufacturing, you do have the opportunity to get that specificity in your overall technology stack. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways of doing that. Thanks for bringing that up. Is that, Eric Kimberling, our CEO and founder, has said this numerous times in engagements where I've been a senior manager or a director on. This whole concept of best of breed is kind of overused. It's more of like best of your needs. And there's certainly something out there that would meet that. There's a couple of different things to go about that. Either it is a standalone application, warehouse management, or distribution management, or transport management system that's unique to your industry. Go after those if that truly is going to be a competitive advantage. If it's not, use what comes with the ERP package. The other thing is that there are a lot of system integrators that have relationships with the ERP vendors, and they will build onto the native platform industry-specific functionality by vertical, right? Automotive, shipping, those kind of things. And so part of the due diligence of selecting an ERP vendor is also deciding if the ERP vendor is going to be implementing their package themselves or if they're going to recommend a partner. And during the sales cycle and our assistance when we've done this is to make sure that they're looking at system integrators that have that expertise in that vertical. So there's always a couple of different options of how to meet your technology needs, but also have it be not so vanilla that you have to kind of work as if you're working in an industry. There are paths to follow that are very industry specific.
I think that's good. That's definitely good information, especially for our community in the packaging industry or in any industry that you're in. Engaging with experts like Third Stage gives you the opportunity to kind of go down industry specific technology opportunities. So that's definitely really important.
I do have a. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
There is something that's unique, I think, to some of these packaging companies, especially those that are lumber or paper based, is that a lot of the technology today is going to make its way into the mills and the plants. And while it's probably safe to say that the workforce that are actually on the factory floor aren't necessarily going to be the highest skilled level from a technology standpoint, but some of these environments are also pretty nasty. And so from a dust, from a debris, from a heat, from a cold. And so part of the selection process that are specific to the packaging industries, if they have mills or plants that are associated with their organization, is also focus on extreme ease of use in tracking whether it's shift level, whether it's an order level, but making it so that the folks on the plant floor, if they're going to be engaging with the technology, which most of these platforms allow that or require that, is to make it as simple as possible to track key information. Don't make it over complex. So some of these industry specific solutions are tailored towards even the work environment that these screens or these monitors or these tablets are going to be working within, to make it, again, as easy as possible for good data to be entered into the system.
Yeah, that's fascinating. How micro level those overall considerations can be specifically on, the manufacturing floor of any industry. That's important to consider for sure. Awesome. Well, I want to switch gears a little bit and kind of ask you about working on a project of this level. You are involved with a variety of third parties, I would assume, from a system integrator to a software vendor to other implementation resources to support. How does Third Stage fit into working with all of those different community base for the project?
I'm going to say this with a little bit of tongue in cheek, but in many cases, the technology will solve itself. Meaning, the SI and the software vendor are expected to deliver the technical expertise to implement their own software. And I would say 95% plus of all new modern systems that we're assisting with are all cloud-based, right? So all the infrastructure is kind of taken care of. And what the folks on the field are going to be doing is much more of the technical design, integrations, and the like. But one thing that's lacking in that perspective is kind of the user business advocate. And so Third Stage fits in that role pretty nicely because we want to make sure that the technology side of it, the SI and the ERP vendor, understands that we're not trying to encroach on their area of expertise. That's what they're hired for. That's what they do it all the time. Our role is much more on the business operational change management aspect. So when we engage with a large client, with a large project, we become not only kind of that PMO eyes of the business, because many of them don't have a lot of PMs sitting around waiting on a large project like this. But it's really getting down to the user base. So when we get into workshops and requirements, and especially during the design and training and deployment, we become kind of a second leg or second arm to the user community and making sure that their needs are met with the software vendors. One thing we have seen, and no disrespect, but a lot of times the SIs bring technical expertise to the table, but they're lacking in the business understanding. So our user community will sit there and have lots of workshops with the technical SMEs. Everyone's shaking their head. They get it. They go off and do some design or prototype. They come back and it's 50% of what we talked about. And so because they don't understand how to translate the business need into how to configure a system, and many times left to its own terminal end, it doesn't go very long and it doesn't go very far. And so a lot of the projects get delayed. The acceptance criteria of going into production gets lower or gets delayed as well. So our involvement tends to be a lot more of no, I'm hearing you talk, but you're missing the point. Here's the point. And all of a sudden light bulbs go off. So we definitely are, if another word to use, a translator between the business, the client, and the technical team that's actually from the software vendor.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're almost like an advocate for the business, just reminding everyone that there needs to be ROI or whatever objective you're looking to achieve.
Yep. And it's really that interaction where we may define an area where configuration of out of the box isn't possible, right? That this is an area that needs to be customized. Every client today says we want a system completely out of the box. That is wishful thinking. The goal is more of let's minimize customization as much as possible, but let's not eliminate the opportunity to customize something a little bit out of the box, that if it meets the business need, let's do that. As long as it doesn't change any kind of system support in the future. When the customization starts becoming overkill is when we have kind of a one-off conversation of, is this the best path, or is there another solution out there we can acquire and implement and integrate with the ERP platform just to keep that customization of the ERP as low as possible?
Absolutely. And when you say customization in this size of a project, who owns that? Is that the SI? Is that the software vendor? How can potential partners of Third Stage ensure that they're owning kind of that intellectual property?
Yeah, it's a good question. It kind of depends. If you go with an SI that is industry focused, like I mentioned, they've taken a platform and added more functionality to it, and that's supported. Anything extra on top of that is probably going to be within the SI's wheelhouse. Unless it's truly customized and it's kind of a standalone thing that maybe the SI built, most of it's going to stay within the software genre. It's hard to break apart because the real big push on the cloud computing is that they have multi-tenant environments that have automatic pushes for updates and security enhancements to everyone working in there. And so anything that is unique to you is most likely going to reside within that ecosphere for you itself, but something that they could potentially leverage for others. The one thing that we ask and have engaged with software vendors at the beginning of an implementation is that if we go down a path with one vendor versus the other, but their functionality isn't just there for the client, we have worked out arrangements where the software vendor does build customized functionality for the client, but at a greatly reduced rate, because their goal is to deploy that to all their clients or all those clients within that industry. So it may be customization initially, but it's something the software vendor will deploy and support. And the client gets kind of the cost benefit because they don't have to pay the full up configuration, or else they wouldn't have gone with that vendor in the first place. So there's a lot of different ways to slice and dice this. It's a matter of degrees of customization, and that's another role that we fill. Yep.
Yeah. And again, kind of taking that advocate stance, because you have had those conversations with other clients in the past, and being able to kind of navigate that, because it sounds, for lack of a better term, a little messy or can be at times. So when you're going into specifically maybe not only this project, but to do that health check, what is some of the main themes that you pull out when it comes to opportunities or misses when implementation plans you evaluate?
I'll talk two different themes that we tell clients, and actually when we first meet with a prospect, I'll give them these two nuggets, and they can do whatever they want with it. Is everyone focuses on the look and feel of a system. Everyone focuses on the functionality of what it does processing. But at the end of the day, it's going to be what is on the screen and what comes in a report. Because that's how they're going to view whether the system is working the way they want it to. So the first and foremost is data. There's not one industry that we can talk about that over time, if we go back to all these multiple systems, homegrown systems, old legacy systems, data typically is a mess. And most modern ERP platforms have changed everything from number of characters in the field and those kind of things. So even legacy data that's clean doesn't map 100% to the new fields in a new system. So getting ahead of data is absolutely the most important thing prior. But for our perspective from third stage and what I've spent, like I mentioned, the last couple of decades in this area is on the change management. People are such the big key. After the fact, like I said, technology will typically work its way through the implementation. The people need to be backfilled on implementation themselves, right? They can't do a day job and work full-time on a project. But after the fact, when 2 months after the SI has gone home and they're using the system and all of a sudden they're doing quarter end close for the first time and they run in through all these issues, is not to panic, right? And they need that support mechanism. Most companies, even the largest ones, run pretty lean from a headcount perspective. When you embark upon not only just an ERP implementation, but a transformation, which means you're looking at your processes and training and skill sets, all that kind of good stuff. Don't minimize that. That is something that is kind of near and dear to our hearts, but something that usually trips people up, because as the business advocates in these implementations, we tend to be the first line of defense when the user base starts complaining that they don't have the support to make it to go live, let alone support after go live. So spending time and understanding that you need to elevate the workforce, you need to elevate the skill set, but more importantly, kind of tying in the motivation of why we're doing this. So everyone is in a sales job. I don't care what role you're in. You have to encourage the people that work for you. You have to sell ideas to leadership. Now's a good time to embark upon that whole communication and change management, because that's what's going to carry you going forward.
Absolutely. Very well said, for sure. And if you have questions about change management or want to kind of dig into what that exactly means further, I'll link below wherever you're getting this video or conversation, a guide to change management, which is what we call it, our secret sauce, guide to change management, which is a playbook basically that takes you through all of the different tactics and methodologies around our change management programs. As well. So that's a little nugget there. But I think that's a great spot to leave it with those two additional nuggets as well. So if you do have questions for Dr. Janke, then you can reach out to him on LinkedIn as well. We also have all of his contact information on our website. And thank you again, Scott, for sharing this with us today. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much, Kyler.
You bet.